Watch the entire video, my lovely viewers, to get the whole thing. Without wasting much of your time, let's get right into it.
This is DJ Mutati exclusive.
Hi lovely viewers, it's me again, your one and only Mutati Mpundu. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time on my channel, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button down below. Turn the bell icon to join the notification squad. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this video in the comment section below. I'll be super glad to hear from you lovely viewers.
Of the country, handed over power to President Hakainde Hichilema. He also went on sabbatical leave and handed over the reins of the party to Honorable Given Luwinda. Honorable Given Luwinda has been at the center of leading the Patriotic Front, the Central Committee and the party at large, and he's been at the center of this storm that has affected the party since then. We will also talk about the role of the Patriotic Front in Tonse Alliance, in UKA Alliance, and also the role of the party generally in bringing together the opposition to be a united front against the UPND. Honorable Given Luwinda is currently in South Africa. He's mourning with the family. You are aware that there was a matter in court yesterday, which we discussed extensively with the lawyer and family spokesperson, Honorable Makebi Zulu. Honorable Given Luwinda is in South Africa to provide solidarity on behalf of the party with other senior members. Honorable Luwinda, welcome to today's broadcast.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for having me on your program, and good evening, viewers. I did watch yesterday's interaction that you had with Council Makebi Zulu, and I subscribe to what he said about the funeral and the court hearing that took place yesterday here in Pretoria.
You are in Pretoria, not as a tourist, but to mourn and to stand with the family during this difficult period. You are credited with having provided leadership. As soon as the late president died, there was total silence from government. And by the way, today, 5th of August, marks 60 days, 2 months exactly, since we lost the president. When the late president died, it took almost 8 hours for the announcement to be done, because it took upon the family, Tasila, supported by her husband, Mr. Mwansa, to break the announcement. Yet the late president had died as early as around 06. And as we have seen from public statements by the president, he knew about the death of the late president as soon as he died, according to what he has said publicly. But government stayed silent for 8 hours. And finally, when the announcement was made, there was nowhere for people to gather. You provided leadership and you asked people to gather at the secretariat. It was many days later before Belvedere could be opened. It was actually 7 days later when President Hakainde Hichilema could speak to the late president. So just walk us back to this crisis and where we are, and just the unfortunate state Zambia seems to be at a standstill because of this matter.
You put it very, very accurately, Ambassador. We heard the rumor as early as 7 hours on that fateful Thursday morning, the 5th of June. And I was shocked like everybody, and I was praying that that was going to end up as a rude joke. I decided to leave my residence to go and join with other members of the Patriotic Front to wait for what was not to be. We were waiting to be told that this was just one of those cruel jokes. By 11, on the 5th of June, this, which I hoped would be a joke, was confirmed to have been the truth. After that, we waited to hear the state do what it is expected to do when such an eventuality occurs. Some people called me and asked whether this information had been confirmed. I still tried very hard to play ignorant until somebody from the state called me and said, "Can you please announce that your president has passed on?" And I said I had no authority whatsoever. It was not up to me to announce such an important piece of information to the country. Because as you are well aware, Ambassador, the announcement of an incumbent head of state is always announced by the vice president. The passing of a former president in the Republic of Zambia has always been announced by the head of state. If not by the head of state, then by a senior government official designated to do so by the head of state directly. I therefore found that it was not appropriate for me to announce. And like you said, we waited, Ambassador. As for us, we waited from 6 in the morning when we got the rumor. From 9 when the information was confirmed, we waited until 15 hours, 15:30 to be precise, when unexpectedly and in a very bewildering manner, the one who was announcing the passing of a former head of state was not a government official. It was not the head of state. No, it was his dear daughter. That, for me, was not acceptable at all. I did not expect that the former head of state's demise would be reduced to a family affair, because the demise of a former head of state is a national matter. It is a matter of national security, as a matter of fact. And yet to see that the family were forced by circumstances, the circumstance of the decision by government to remain mute over this matter, that to me was the start of this very diabolical journey of 60 days without putting the remains of a former head of state where they belong. Now, after that, I had no choice, Ambassador. As acting president of the bigger family to which President Edgar Lungu belonged, the Patriotic Front, I had no option but to provide leadership to members of the party. I immediately convened an urgent National Executive Committee meeting where the news was broken to those who managed to attend. And my colleagues and I agreed that we had to inform members of the party across the country and wherever else in diaspora there would be about the passing of the dear president. That is how, Ambassador, I went ahead to announce in the evening of the 5th of June. What followed, Ambassador, was quite amazing. On the 6th of June, round about 18 hours, I got a phone call from a senior government official who asked me if I could go to Cabinet Office to go and have a meeting. When I asked what this meeting was about, I was told that it was to be a discussion on the passing of the former president of the Patriotic Front. My question to him was, why me? Why all of a sudden did they want to recognize me as being acting president of the Patriotic Front? Because ever since that coup, that bloodless coup that occurred on the 24th of October 2023, the state had not even wanted to acknowledge that President Edgar Chagwa was president of the PF. And they did not want to acknowledge me as vice president of the Patriotic Front. So I asked them why all of a sudden they thought they could discuss this with me. I objected and I said to them, can you go and discuss this matter with the one that President Hakainde recognizes as being president of the Patriotic Front. And by that time, the one who they were recognizing was Robert Chavinga. However, in further thought, I decided I was going to ask some elders of the party to go and intervene, to listen to them, to hear what they were trying to say to us about the passing of our president. Unfortunately, that meeting was not to be. We therefore moved on and decided that all members of the Patriotic Front were to gather at all our offices in the provinces, at all our offices in the districts, and also at our headquarters in Lusaka. We announced, the Patriotic Front through me announced, that the places where people would gather and mourn the passing of the former president of the Republic of Zambia, who was also president of the Patriotic Front, would be at our designated official offices. I want to take opportunity of your interview, Ambassador, to thank my fellow leaders, to thank all the leaders of the Patriotic Front, to thank all members of the Patriotic Front, because they conducted themselves in a very exemplary manner. They gathered in homes, they gathered in offices of the Patriotic Front, and they provided for themselves. It was only after a number of days when we heard the Secretary to the Cabinet in the name of Patrick Kangwa, on Saturday, if my memory serves me right, on Saturday evening, Secretary to Cabinet Patrick Kangwa went to the press, not the head of state, but the Secretary to Cabinet. And in a very unofficial setting, there was no national flag that was on the table of that discussion, that public announcement. There was no national flag. There was no national emblem. It was a totally informal press briefing where Patrick Kangwa said, His Excellency the President Hakainde Hichilema has decided to honor the former president, Edgar Chagwa Lungu, with a 7 days national mourning in recognition of the immense contribution he made to Zambia. When I heard that, I got very, very disturbed. And I'm sure many Zambians joined me in suffering that pain. The pain that was induced in us by Hakainde Hichilema, President of Zambia, through his Secretary to Cabinet, to claim that the 7 days of national mourning were an honor and that they were being granted to President Edgar Chagwa Lungu as though he did not deserve it. And to say it was in recognition of his immense contribution to Zambia. I felt that to have been a slight on the position that President Edgar Chagwa Lungu had as the 6th Republican president. Because that is not an honor, that is an entitlement. When a minister in Zambia dies, cabinet has no choice but to declare at least 1 day of national mourning. And when the president dies, it's not as though they are being done a favor. And I felt that that statement in itself was a slight. It was totally inappropriate. And then we were told that people would gather at Belvedere Lodge, Government Belvedere Lodge, and that would be the official mourning place for His Excellency President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. Like I said, by that time, Ambassador, the Patriotic Front leadership had already agreed that all members of the Patriotic Front would gather at PF offices. And as for those in the capital city, Lusaka, they would gather at the PF Secretariat. When the announcement was made by Patrick Kangwa that the government Belvedere Lodge would be the official place for mourning, we encouraged people. We said those who want can go and gather at Belvedere. However, we did not find it appropriate to tell our people to leave our National Secretariat. We asked them to continue to gather at the PF Secretariat. And now allow me to thank all those, our friends, our supporters, who came out to us to render to us material, financial, and moral support. They did a good job, and we managed to at our party headquarters and also the district offices across the country. As things would unfold, Ambassador Mwamba, we heard that the family had been met by government representatives and that there was an agreement that had been arrived at, which was that the mortal remains of our dear president would be repatriated to Lusaka. And that in that agreement, it was agreed that members of the Patriotic Front would be at hand at the airport to receive the remains of our dear departed president. And that after that, the mortal remains, would be driven to the residence of the former president, and that the mortal remains would be escorted by his ADC, his security, and his doctor, and that no other person from the state would be allowed to accompany the body. Then we heard that the road leading to the residence of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was being repaired. And we wondered what was the reason for this. Why were they ripping off the road on a day when we were expecting the cortege to take the remains of the president to his residence? We protested, and they said they would stop the work, they would store the work until after burial. And on the material day, I asked members of the party, senior leaders of the party, to go to the airport, to go and see whether the list that were supplied to cabinet, the list of all members of the Central Committee, all our provincial members, and all members of the Tonsi Alliance, whom we said would be on the apron to receive the remains of our dear president, was at the airport. My colleagues went there and phoned and said the sentries that were posted there were saying that that list had not been handed over to them by Secretary to Cabinet. Only to come and hear that, as a matter of fact, there were people printing T-shirts bearing the portrait of our president in thousands. And we wondered who are printing them. If there's any person who had the authority to print our T-shirts, they would not do it without informing the leadership of the PF. Therefore realized that this was something clandestine and this was meant for mischief. The family fortunately also got wind of this, but they also got wind of the fact that the program that had been agreed upon initially was vitiated, and that now there was going to be a private church ceremony at the airport. I'd like your viewers to know that the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport does not have a church. It does not have any place designated as a place of prayer. So people got surprised. Where is this church service going to be conducted? And who is going to preside over it? And information filtered through to the family that the decision that the family had arrived at, that the body of the remains of His Excellency President Edgar Chagwa Lungu would be made to go to Mulungushi International Conference Center, and that the family would be the first to view the body that too was vitiated, and that the Republican president, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, would be the first to view the body. Based on that and many other reasons which the family is capable of addressing, they decided that they would not allow for the mortal remains of President Edgar Lungu to go to Lusaka. And that is what has brought this diabolical impasse, where now the state is fighting with the family on the ownership of the mortal remains of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. I listened very carefully to the submissions yesterday, and I also read the submissions by the state, and I also read the submissions by the in court. And I have to say, Makebi Zulu did a fantastic job, and we in the Patriotic Front are very, very proud of his performance. He did a sterling job in all the submissions that were made to the court, because there is no law in Zambia that prescribes how a former head of state shall be buried. And this is only a matter that the state is trying to push purely because of precedence. And there is also an argument, Ambassador, which I'm sure a lot of your viewers have heard about, that a similar event occurred after the demise of the founding president of the Republic of Zambia, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. And this argument has been presented by Muliro Kabesha on behalf of the government of Zambia. What he is failing to acknowledge is that at that time, President Kenneth Kaunda was still enjoying the benefits of former head of state, number one. Number two, there had already been an agreement between the government and the larger part of the Kenneth Kaunda family. There was only one son of Kenneth David Kaunda who had a different view. It cannot be compared to the current situation where the whole family of Edgar Chagwa Lungu has said no. Under these strange circumstances, where there is insistence that there will be a private church function which may exclude us members of the family and may exclude his friends in the Patriotic Front, and may also lead to the mortal remains of the president being handled by other people except those that have been designated by the family. That is a big difference. And people must not confuse the two and say because there was a court matter over President Kaunda, therefore it also follows that the government has a right to sue the family over the mortal remains of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. What has to be remembered, my dear Ambassador, is that we're talking about a president who was denied the privilege of enjoying his own development. President Edgar Chagwa Lungu built markets throughout Zambia. And yet,
Acting
in his
President,
retirement,
before you go there, thank you very much, and thank you for the quick update to our audience. The decision to bury the late president in South Africa has attracted controversy, has attracted concerns. The standoff between Zambia's head of state, President Hakainde Hichilema, and the family is also a matter of serious concern, to the extent that President Cyril Ramaphosa had to send his Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ronald Lamola, to Zambia to explain that the standoff, probably they wish that it could be resolved, but in the event that the family made a decision to put to rest the late president in South Africa, that there was nothing they could do, because that was the law, that was the precedent. Many high cases like this, except that they were not president, like the case of the general in Angola, where the two states found themselves in similar circumstances, the court favored the family. President of Zimbabwe, President Emerson Mnangagwa, who was a classmate of President Edgar Lungu, took it very personal. He even sent his vice president to attempt to resolve this matter. You saw the images at State House. President Hakainde Hichilema literally dismissed, said this was a matter between him and the family, and it was a Zambian affair, and it will be resolved. President Jacob Zuma, the former president, was denied landing rights in the quest to resolve this issue. And of course, many circumstances that led to Hichilema abruptly cancelling the period of national mourning that was supposed to go up to 23rd of June, and he abruptly cancelled it on the 19th. We are a ridicule in the region. Clearly friends of Zambia, friends of Edgar Lungu, friends of President Hakainde Hichilema have attempted to resolve this issue. I shouldn't even forget about the Malawian president, a former Malawian president, Bakili Muluzi, and his son, who have also been very instrumental in trying to resolve this issue. We even are aware of the former president in Tanzania. Why hasn't President Hakainde Hichilema helped resolve this matter? Why has instead sued the widow and the family? What is your reflection?
Ambassador, thank you for what you've just said now. And indeed, we ought to pay gratitude to all current and former statesmen and women in the region for their intercession. They were doing that because their desire was that Zambia should continue to maintain its integrity as a country. And we owe them gratitude. And on behalf of the Patriotic Front, I thank them most sincerely for their efforts. Yes, Zambia indeed now is standing as a laughingstock, not only in the region, but globally. Because now everybody who is following this matter is wondering how a people, through their government, can subject a poor woman, a widow, to mourning for more than 60 days. How a government can use its machinery to subject a family to come to a standstill in their lives because of the desire by the government to have access to the mortal remains of a former president. And when I say government, I am being too general, because I don't think that there has ever been a meeting in Zambia where government officials, civil servants, and the three wings of government, including parliament, sat to demand that the mortal remains of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu must be buried in Lusaka. The desire, as far as I can see, is the desire by one person, President Hakainde Hichilema. Should people be subjected to 60 days of mourning simply because one man has this insatiable appetite to cause pain in others? Because for me, and for many other people who are following this matter, the only reason why this matter has not been put to bed is because somebody is enjoying the suffering of the others. And we have to ask ourselves a question, Ambassador. We have to ask ourselves a question. The family was willing to repatriate the body. The family had agreed that President Hakainde would be allowed to superintend over the visitors, the dignitaries. But they said President Edgar Chagwa Lungu himself made a wish, a death wish, that because of the amount of pain, because of the amount of suffering that Hakainde Hichilema has made me go through, I would not like him to be at my burial. I would not like him to come and say anything, because if he comes there and says good things about me, it will be an act of hypocrisy. And when the family said, as long as you don't come and speak, as long as your government doesn't come to speak, we will allow you to come and bury our dear president at Embassy Park. Then they themselves as government decided, no, President Hakainde must go and have a church service at the airport. A church service which hadn't been agreed upon by the family. Doesn't it make sense? Didn't it make sense when the family said, in that case, please don't force us, we shall bury the mortal remains of our dear father, our dear husband, our dear brother, where we want to bury him, where you will not have access. What is the issue with that? And to just correct you, Ambassador, much as the official documents in court are saying that the first respondent is the widow, and the second to the sixth respondents are family members, and the seventh is the family spokesperson who happens to be lawyer Makebi Zulu. The truth of the matter is that the one who was indicted is Edgar Chagwalungu. The one who, as far as I'm concerned, is in court today is Edgar Chagwalungu. And that is the reason why his mortals remain uninterred. They remain unburied to this day. Now, how can a country sink so low as to keep the remains of its former president uninterred purely because one man wants to be there to superintend, to preside over the burial of his predecessor? It is totally unexplainable. I wonder whether there is anybody who has an explanation. As for me and others, we have wrecked our minds to try and understand what is it that President Hakainde wants out of this burial. What is it? Because if he was to just say, I'm staying away from the burial, there would be no problem. And Ambassador, you know very well, there are many examples we can cite in the region. Here in South Africa, not too long ago, the former vice president and the family decided the burial shall be a private affair. The government did not insist. They buried their former president. It is now a matter of history. Remember what also happened when President Robert Mugabe died. Madam Mugabe said they did not want President Mnangagwa to go to the burial. President Mnangagwa said, I will oblige. I will only stand at the airport to receive the mortal remains of my predecessor. After that, I'll have nothing to do with the burial. But as head of state, I will facilitate for the burial of a former head of state. The burial took place without any hullabaloo, without any such drama. What is it that has befallen my dear country? To the extent that the mortal remains of a man suffered for the country could remain in the morgue, could remain in the freezer for 60 days. And I'd like to remind your viewers, Ambassador, I was saying to you that President Edgar Lungu superintended over the development of a lot of infrastructure facilities in Zambia. I was talking about markets. He built several markets across the breadth and width of Zambia. And yet, in his retirement, when he went to a market, he was stopped by the police. He contributed to the building and strengthening of the Christian faith. He was loved by people of church. He was invited to various churches, and yet the government was stopping him even to go into church. He is the one who superintended over the completion of the construction of the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport. The Zambia Airways 2014 came about during the time when Edgar Chagwa Lungu was Minister of Justice. And as president, he ensured that Zambia Airways 2014 would operate as a viable business. And yet, President Edgar Lungu was not allowed to go and use that airport. He was not allowed to board Zambia Airways 2014. President Edgar Lungu paved roads across the country. And yet the poor man, in his retirement, even jogging was prohibited. He was not allowed to jog. President Edgar Lungu was invited to a peace conference in South Korea. And I went ahead of him. The two of us were invited. I went ahead of him as his vice president, only to be shocked to be told 2 days later that your dear president has boarded off a plane. How did anyone expect President Edgar Lungu to behave? When President Edgar Lungu requested in 2022, he informed the government, I have a condition which has been attended to by doctors in South Africa. Please permit me to go and meet my doctors. Secretary to Cabinet or Deputy Secretary to Cabinet wrote to him saying, sorry, the government does not have money. He responded and said, please facilitate for me to go. I will get money from friends and family. And as you saw in the response by Muliro Kabesha in court, he said they stopped him from going to South Korea because they feared that he was going to politic. They stopped him to go to church because they feared that he was going to politic. They stopped him from jogging because they feared he was going to politic. They stopped him even to come to South Africa to have medical attention. He did not disclose the ailment, the condition he had. And when you hear this being a submission of a government to a court of law, you even wonder, what kind of justice system do we have? Because everybody knows that the health condition of an individual is a private matter. Why did they expect President Edgar Lungu to say to them, this is my condition? And yet, as a matter of fact, as you and I, Ambassador, and as many viewers of yours will know, as former head of state, his health file is in the possession of government. So they knew what his condition was.
Yeah.
And all this was happening to this poor man. And they expected, how did they expect?
This case is very similar to what happened in Ghana. And I'm glad that there has been public announcement to the effect that one day the remains of the late president will lie in Zambia. You know, when Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of the Republic of Ghana, died in Bucharest in Romania on 27th April 1972. Remember, there was a coup against him and there was a hostile government against him. It was decided that he would be buried in Guinea. President Sekou Touré then offered to bury the late president in Guinea. And for 20 years, the remains of Kwame Nkrumah lay in Guinea. It was only later, when there was a friendly government, that there was a negotiation between the family, the government of Ghana, and the government of Guinea, that the remains were now taken to Ghana. They were initially buried at his hometown. But again, I think a few years later, it was decided that he should be brought to the National Monument, where a mausoleum was created for him. He was buried 3 times. The family has said one day the remains of the late president will come to Zambia.
This is DJ Mutati exclusive.
Alright, that's all for you today, lovely viewers. If you did enjoy the video, please don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section below. Tell me what you think about the video you just watched in the comment section below. I'll be super glad to hear from you, lovely viewers. Once again, I go by the name of Mutati Mpundu. I love you, peace, I gotta go.